Transformations, Women, Gender, and Psychology. 3rd edition by Mary Crawford. Chapter 7, continued. Intersections of ethnic and sexual identity. Lesbians and bisexual women are underrepresented in psychological research. Lesbians and bisexual women of color are even more invisible, a minority within a minority. Does identity development differ from women to different ethnic and racial backgrounds? Intersectional identities may create more stress. For example, LGBT people may remain closeted in African American families. On the other hand, intersectional identities may bring strength and resilience. For example, the strong family loyalty in Asian American families may override the stigma of LGBT family members, or the coping skills that an African American or Latino family learns to deal with racism might help in dealing with homophobia. In the same way, the development of diverse groups of lesbians and bisexual women may be more similar than different. In a study that directly compared white, African American, Asian American, and Latin LB women, an internet sample of 967 women whose average age was 21 was surveyed on their identity, development, and well-being. The 4 ethnic groups had reached developmental milestones, such as the first same-sex sexual experience at about the same age. They had about the same levels of internalized homophobia and the same amount of involvement in the LGBT community. The only major difference was that all the women of color were less out to their families than the white women were. Despite having more objective stressors such as unemployment, the women of color in this study had managed to connect with an LGBT community and maintaining positive LB identity, indicating resilience and resourcefulness. There are differences in the experiences of African American, Latina, and Asian American LG women due to their cultural backgrounds, and differences within these cultural groups, too. Olivia Espin, a pioneering lesbian psychologist who conducted the first research on Latina lesbians in the early 80s, noted, "Because as a Latina, she's an ethnic minority person, she must be bicultural in American society. Because she is a lesbian, she has to be polycultural among her own people. The dilemma for Latina lesbians is how to integrate who they are culturally, racially, and religiously with their identity as lesbians and women. Latin lesbians are perhaps more likely to remain in the closet, keeping their orientation secrets from their family and friends, than white lesbians because most members of the ethnic group strongly disapprove of lesbians. However, families who become aware of a daughter's lesbianism are unlikely to openly reject or disown her. They will remain silent, accept the situation tactically but not openly." In a questionnaire study of 16 Latina lesbians, the respondents, like white participants in previous research, showed a wide range of subjective understandings of their lesbianism. They also wrote eloquently about the difficulty of integrating their ethnic and sexual identities. This woman had earlier said that being a Cuban and being a lesbian were equally important to her. "I guess that if the choices were absolute, I would choose living among lesbians. But I want to point out that I would be extremely unhappy if all my Latin cultures were taken out of my lesbian life. I feel that I am both, and I don't want to have to choose." The Roman Catholic religion, which teaches homosexuality is a mortal sin, is the predominant religion in the Latino community, creating dilemmas of loyalty for Latina lesbians. To date, there has been little research on how Latina women reconcile the demands of religion with their sexual identities as lesbians or bisexual women. Olivia Espin eloquently described how she has resolved her own spiritual identity. "Nothing matters to me more than my relationship with God. Yet I refuse to let religious institutions and authorities determine how I should or will live. Religion and spirituality are not about rules and holy books. They are about our innermost being, our expectations, hopes, and desires for transcendence. It is not God or the sense of the sacred and divine who is punishing or persecuting us for being lesbians, but rather some of the self-declared agents of God who transmit their own sexism and heterosexism as if it were God's word. African American lesbians also have described issues of integrating multiple identities and group memberships. As lesbians, as members of the Black community, and as a part of the larger culture with its racism, sexism, and heterosexism, as this case study shows. Diane hesitated to discuss her lesbian feelings while in college. The college she attended was predominantly white, and Diane relied a great deal on the Black community there for support. She considered that coming out to these individuals might jeopardize her acceptance in the group. Although Diane continued to explore her lesbian feelings internally, she has also continued to date men. Several years later, as she did begin to come out to others, she feared that identification as a lesbian might pull her away from what she considered her primary reference group, Black Americans. In the African American communities, the African American church often plays a central role, and religion has helped African Americans cope with oppression throughout American history. However, many pastors teach their congregation that homosexuality is a sin, and justify this belief by quoting the Bible. Therefore, LGBT African Americans may delay or avoid coming out. As one young woman told a researcher, "We're all Christians and we're all Baptist. I don't know if you know, in a Black family, being gay is like, wow, really, really taboo. We've all been going to church all of our lives and raised in church. That's the reason I didn't come out right away, because of that." In a study of African American LGBT young adults, being religious was associated with a high level of resilience, but also with a high level of internalized homophobia. In other words, more religious people had more strength to handle challenges in their lives, but also were more ashamed of their sexuality. For these young people, religion was truly a mixed blessing. Although Asian American LB women share some experiences with other ethnic minority LB women, their intersectional experiences are unique in their ways. Traditional Asian cultures are strongly patriarchal and have very negative attitudes towards homosexuality. Therefore, Asian LB women may be devalued both as women and as sexual minorities, because traditional Asians values place great emphasis on the extended family. Women are expected to continue the family line through marrying and bearing children. Being lesbians or bisexuals brings shame to the whole family. On the other hand, traditional East Asian religions, such as Buddhism, do not specifically condemns homosexuality, and sexual behavior is considered a private matter within families. How do Asian American women cope with the challenges of their intersectional identities? Mi Ray Sung and her colleagues addressed this question with an internet sample of 50 Asian American women whose average age was 24 and whose ethnic background was diverse: Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, and others. They were asked open-ended questions about the challenges they face as LB women, how they cope, and the positive things about being an LB Asian American woman. Among their biggest challenges were conflicts with Asian American family members and being afraid to come out to family members. Many women said that they coped by just not talking about their personal life at home, instead emphasizing their academic achievements. Because of the Asian cultural taboo on open discussions of sex and sexuality, they were able to steer conversations away from sensitive topics and keep their sexuality and lesbian relationships hidden from their families. Despite the challenges of being an Asian American LB woman, participants also believed there were benefits. For example, they felt part of an LGBT community. Some reported that they had developed a positive sense of self and a unique and intersectional perspective of the world that allowed them to view society more critically and intelligently and find commonalities with a lot of different communities. Hookups, dating, and romantic love. Returning to the heteronormative scripts for female sexuality, let's look at heterosexual women's experiences of sexual and emotional satisfactions in casual sex, dating, and romantic relationships.